Hello, everyone. Today we are jumping into a single word that has a lot of different usages. It all means kind of the same thing, but we're talking about hazu. Hazu is one of those words that comes on the end of a sentence. And when I say sentence, I mean either a sentence or a clause. But you've got a subject verb or verb, the end of a chunk of a sentence. And it is used to talk about certainty in one way or another. The ways it's most often translated is either should be or supposed to be, or in the negative sense, it might be that can't be. But you need to stay here for the entire lesson, or at least get to the end of the lesson on your own, to know that you cannot treat this as a direct translation. You cannot say hazu means should be, therefore should be is hazu. There are other ways to say should in Japanese, and you can't mix them up. So we will talk about that a bit towards the end, but just keep in mind that should be is one of the ways that you can use hazu, but it does not work in the other direction. So let's jump into it. It can be used in different ways, but you're using it to show, at least in the positive form, an emphasis on what you believe to be true, what you expect to be true. So let's jump into the way we form it, and then we'll look at some examples, okay? Now, you can put just about anything in front of it. And so we've got verbs, we've got adjectives, we've got nouns. And let's take a look at each of these. Excuse me. All right, rather, let me jump back, sorry. With the verbs, it's easy. We're not going to have, like you're starting to notice, with a lot of these clause ending things. We've done kara, we've done node, we've done ato, we've done mai, and not all of them, but so many of them. When you have basically anything in front of it, you're using these short slash casual forms. So this is no different. Kaeru hazu, you would never say kaerimasu hazu. That doesn't make it more or less polite, it just makes it wrong. What you'll see later on is whatever comes after hazu determines the politeness of the sentence. So it goes right on to verbs, kaeru hazu. We'll see examples of these. They should go home, but that doesn't make sense by itself. So let's look at it in a sentence. Amai hazu, it should be sweet. In this sense, you can almost treat it like a noun. You're just sticking the amai right in front of it. With the na adjectives, you need that na attached to it. So hima na hazu can't be hima hazu. Hima na hazu. And with the nouns themselves, you need no. And so in that sense, it almost looks like a noun. You don't really treat it as a noun. You don't think of it as a noun because it doesn't really represent a thing. But you can see that if this was, a noun, for example, hon, I'm not sure why a hon would go home or would be sweet, but you would treat it the same way. Kaeru hon, amai hon, hima no hon, isha no hon. So you're connecting it in the same way that you would connect a noun. Now, the best way to understand this is to look at it in sentences. Like I said, this is used to show an expectation of the way something is supposed to be, the way something should be. And this is based on, any knowledge that you might have. And as I noted before, whatever comes before the hazu doesn't affect the politeness. That's why it's always in the casual form. Whatever comes afterwards is where you see it, whether it's polite or not polite. Hazu is flexible. It doesn't have any inherent politeness, so it can be hazu desu. It can be hazu da. So use it whenever you want. So let's take a look at this. お父さんは6時に帰るはずです. So if we looked at it just by itself, let's take the sentence and let's drop off what we are adding. Let's just look at お父さん。お父さんは6時に帰ります。This one says, Dad or father is coming home at 6. This is a statement of fact. Right? You have nothing to doubt that, he's not coming home at 6. Hazu, however, interestingly enough, when you say should sounds like you're making it stronger. But in this case, you're actually adding a bit of flexibility to it. If you were saying he will return at 6 and you absolutely know, like he's going to come back at 6, then you would just use that sentence. But if you need to hedge somewhat, because sometimes he comes home a bit later, he plans to come home at 6, but you need to hedge for some reason. Often this is done because you're reporting this information to someone else. Your teacher might say, oh, I need to call your father. What time will he be home? And you don't want to say, well, he will be home at 6, so please call at 6:01, because you want to hedge a bit. What if he's a few minutes late? You might say something like this. お父さんは6時に帰るはずです. He should be back. He should return at 6. But maybe not. It gives you a bit of wiggle room by using hazu. Should sounds like it's going the other direction, but you're actually adding some space there to say, oh, teacher, yeah, he should be back at 6. So in parentheses, maybe not call until 6:10 or 6:15. But based on the information that you have, this is your expectation. You expect him to return at 6. Similarly, if you have a teacher schedule, now this doesn't really work it does work for high schools sometimes, but especially for universities, teachers have class time and then they have, say, office hours where, they shouldn't be busy during this time because they don't have class. So maybe 2 o'clock on Wednesday, you say, it's 2 o'clock right now. The teacher doesn't have class. They should be free. Do you know that they're free? You don't. But it's your expectation that they're free. So, 先生は今はずなはず。先生は今暇なはずです. That's a bit tricky to say. 暇なはずです. So, you're using this to show your expectation. Now, you can leave it just like this. You have just a simple sentence. You can also use it to draw contrast with something else. So you can show an expectation, but actually it's not that case. So for example, you get a cookie and the cookie, it's a sugar cookie. So should sugar cookies be sweet? Yes, they're sugar cookies. But for whatever reason, it's not. So このクッキーが甘いはずだが全然甘くない. This cookie should be sweet. Now notice here that I'm using should more to show kind of an expectation that didn't pan out. このクッキーが甘いはずだが or だけど using the one that we learned last week. 甘いはずだけど全然甘くない. What did you expect? Sweetness. What did you get? Something else. So, hazu is used in this situation to show that contrast. Similarly, let me jump through these because it'll actually highlight that for us. Similarly, with this one, you might use noni as well, which we also learned. あの人は医者のはずなのに会社員だ. So maybe for whatever reason, this person was speaking as if they were a doctor. Maybe I don't think what you do as a job is important, but maybe this person thinks that a doctor has more status and they're more important. So at a party, they were talking up that they were a doctor. Maybe because they thought that you'd never see them at their work. And lo and behold, they work at the same company as you. And so one day you see this person sitting down at a desk in, a white collar job, and you say, wait, that person, they told me that they were a doctor. So you have information that makes you think they should be a doctor. But look at them. They're an office worker over there. The noni would probably be in there for the specific situation to say, they shouldn't be a doctor. Like they told me, or they should be a doctor. They told me they were a doctor. In fact, I had them recommend some medicine for me. Why are they here? I am disappointed in this situation. So the hazu here can be used to show, show that difference. Another example, it could be that there could be no malevolence involved. They could have just changed jobs. It's like I thought they were supposed to be, but they're not. Let me give you a few more examples that aren't in here. You might have been wanting to go outside. And you say, yeah, I wanted to go outside. And sorry, there's the kanji for that word in the middle. It was supposed to be, or it's supposed to be clear today. What's up with this rain? If you walk outside, it's cloudy. You say, what? These clouds aren't supposed to be here. So you can either use it to show an expectation, and sometimes used to hedge, to say, yeah, they should be home soon, or that test should be easy. So, you don't know. You don't know that the test is easy. So you wouldn't say that test is easy unless you've already taken it. But maybe you heard someone else talking about it, or the way the teacher described it, you're like, that test should be easy. I don't need to study. You could say something like that. あの試験は簡単なはずだよ. Again, expectation. And you don't have to, but you can follow it up with yes, and that happened to be the case, or more often you followed up with, but that wasn't true. I thought it was supposed to be easy, but it's not. So that's how we use it here in the positive form. Now we probably will practice this a bit, but I'm going to put all the practice at the end because the two forms of hazu work really well together. And so I'd like to practice them together instead of restricting you to one or the other. But again, today's lesson's been very quiet, but if you have questions, don't forget, you can just toss out questions whenever you want. Again, even if I'm in the middle of speaking. Let's flip it around. Oh, actually, before we flip it around, let me expand on this one a bit more. So we're still sticking with the it's supposed to be this way. We talked about, amai hazu or kaeru hazu. You can use negative forms as well. So you could say, and this ties in with the lesson we were doing just an hour ago. In referring to your parents, maybe you want to, play more video games, and your older brother says, no, our mom and dad will be home soon. And you say, no, they shouldn't be back yet. They shouldn't be coming back yet. Mada kairenai hazu da. That negative form can also work. You're still saying something positively, like they're supposed to not be back yet. They're supposed to be not back. They're supposed to not be back yet. Excuse me. You could also say this. And this is kind of coming from the context of me. I don't talk to my children in Japanese, but perhaps my wife. My son isn't a fan of spicy food, so he always says, is this spicy? And, we'll usually say, no, it's not. But if we're not quite sure, but we think it's not spicy, we'll say, karakunai hazu da yo. It shouldn't be spicy. We got curry, but it was the kids' curry. So no, it shouldn't be spicy. We might not know 100%. We haven't had it ourselves, but we can guess. So yeah, it shouldn't be spicy. Karakunai hazu da yo. So we can put negative forms in front of hazu as well. We can also, as you saw, we can negate the whole thing. And there's two different ways. You can use it the way that's on the screen, hazu ga nai. You can also use it this way. And I'll go ahead and say I'm not entirely sure which, like if there's a difference in meaning. I don't think there is. Fairly confident that I don't think there is, but I can't say entirely. The hazu ga nai or hazu janai. And interestingly, it's often used for talking about something that is impossible in the sense that that can't be true. That can't be the case. There's no way that it's this. It's got that feeling to it. And so you're taking the should that you said before and you're saying should not, cannot, can't. And I don't mean can't in the potential sense, as in he can't speak Japanese. More so, he can't speak Japanese in the expectation sense. Or there's no way he can speak Japanese. He shouldn't be able to speak Japanese. It's that scene in the movie where, you see this character that's spoken English the entire time, and all of a sudden they're speaking Chinese to someone that just came on screen. And you think to yourself, wait, they're not... Everything we know about this character would suggest that they can't speak Chinese. They shouldn't be able to speak Chinese. Okay, maybe there's something about their past we don't know. So this is using from showing things that you don't believe to be true. And it's got a fairly strong feel to it. So if you say something like, for example, furu hazu janai. So again, we're going to the park example. We're heading out today. It's nice outside. And someone says, oh, but what if it rains? What are we going to do? Should we bring umbrellas? And you say, no, it's not going to rain. There's no way it's going to rain. Furu hazu ga nai yo. Furu hazu janai. So you're very strongly saying, there's no way it's going to rain. It's not going to rain. Similarly, second example. Sensei no hazu ga nai yo. So you see, you're sitting in class and you're expecting the teacher to walk in, but a 12-year-old walks in instead. And they stand at the front as if they're about to start teaching. And you say, that can't be the teacher. There's no way that's the teacher. It might also be similar to the way the teacher dresses, for example. Depending on the country or in the culture, and teachers dress certain ways, or they're expected to dress or look a certain way. And in Japan, most teachers wear suits, especially in the higher levels. And so if you saw a teacher walk in with shorts and a t-shirt, you'd say, that can't be a teacher. Look at the way they're dressed. You're showing a negative expectation. Something can't be true. That movie's for kids. It can't be scary. Kowai hazu ga nai. Or this happens if you're a parent, if children are usually noisy. So if children are quiet, you think something's wrong. So, the kids are playing, they have a friend over. They shouldn't be quiet. So they must be doing something bad. Shizuka no hazu ga nai yo. So we're using this for these negative expectations. So unfortunately, without looking at what's coming up, I've actually overlapped some of the examples. So I apologize for having said them already. But let's look at the examples that are here in Renshu. Kyou wa ame ga furu hazu ga nai. So this one, look at the translation. There's no way it'll rain today. This hazu ga nai or hazu janai is one of those ones where there's not a good translation where you should stick to it, unless you want your English translations to sound very stilted. There's so many ways that we express this kind of information in English, and so it could be what's on the screen. There's no way. We might say it couldn't rain today. Like, that's impossible. You know, it shouldn't. It can't possibly. These are all ways that you could see this being translated. You're just seeing a strong rejection of whatever's coming before. And it could be like the screen says, it could be based on what you're looking at, what the forecast said, something else. You know, it could, you just are thinking, there's no way. You know, it could be, you could be talking about two teams playing and a team of university students versus a team of elementary school students. And you're like, there's no way the elementary school kids are going to win. Of course they won't. It's that kind of thing. Secondly, あの人は先生のはずじゃない、がない. You know, the way they look, the way they speak, their age, you know, anything that might make you, you know, doubt that. Same with movies or with a class. You know, Japanese classes, except for these VC classes, Japanese classes shouldn't be quiet. They should involve lots of speaking, questions, and answers, and laughing when people make silly mistakes. Excuse me. So again, these are all used to show, you know, rejections of expectations. And you'll notice that although we introduced it as hazuganai, of course you can use it in the polite form, arimasen. And I'll go ahead and note that this is very common, not just with Renshu, but with almost all learning resources that you'll run into, especially when you start getting into these higher forms. You'll see everything shown in a casual / dictionary form or short form. So just because something has nai on the end of it doesn't mean you need to use nai. It might be, you know, arimasen, or if nai is referring to, say, shinai, that doesn't mean you have to use shinai. It often means you could also use shimasen. So I wouldn't get too, there are exceptions to that, but I wouldn't get too hung up on, oh, it's nai, it has to be nai. I need nai in there. Now, before I talk about a few extra things, I'd like to pull back and practice just a little bit, okay? So first, let's talk about Japan. Let's talk about Japan. And let's talk about things that you expect to definitely be the case, or not definitely, but you're like, it should be the case, or it should not be the case in Japan. And now you can say things that are very obvious, that you know 99%, 99.9% that that's true. For example, you could say, and we're going to all start our sentences off with this, either Nihon de wa, or if you're using if we're using iru or aru, we might use Nihon ni wa. So let me give you an example. This is a silly sentence, but it's good for practice. In Japan, there should be a lot of Japanese people. Now, we all know that that's true, but it, you know, you can show this. It still works in that sense. But especially for those of you that have not been to Japan, but even for those of you that have been, or maybe think about places you haven't been, think about your expectations of Japan. Not expectations as in it should be fun, but expectations in the situation that's already over here. There should be this, there should not be that, kind of thing. And yeah, give it a shot. Feel free to use the negative as well. Oh, I like that sentence. To make it even better, Now it would be sakura ga saku. Sakura ga saku. To make it even better, add the time. Because that really ties into that hedging feel to it. Because you say the sakura in Japan, the sakura should bloom. When should they bloom? And if you don't know, the answer is 4. Which month is 4? The 4th month is usually when they bloom. They should bloom in the 4th month, but sometimes things change, so you don't know absolutely for sure. The streets should be clean, which actually is not true. It's true only for certain times of the day, depending on where you are. Most streets are much cleaner compared to, say, the US, which is where I'm from. But if you're in a high traffic area, they can get very dirty at night and then be miraculously clean the next morning. 残業がある。あるはずです. You need that verb before it. 日本には残業があるはずです. And that might be a bit, I know we're just practicing, but just as stepping back and speaking from a cultural standpoint, zangyo or overtime is very common in Japan. But I wouldn't say that there's an expectation of zangyo. You might say the should aspect of this also has kind of a feeling of that's the way things should be. Like there should be a lot of zangyo, which isn't quite, you probably don't feel that way. You might. You might feel like people need to work more, but you might say this is a longer sentence, but it might be something like there's, there should be a lot of people, that suffer from overworking. But that gets into a slightly more complex sentence. For this sentence, don't forget you're not sticking. When you have a noun, especially if you're saying there should be these, it's usually going to be noun ga aru hazu, or noun, if it's a animate thing, noun ga iru hazu. Oh, wait, sorry. I've left out, now that I see. Noun ga aru. There we go. Yeah, that one would be, that fits much better. I like someone used the negative form, which I like. They said, in Japan, there shouldn't, there's no way that there's unicorns in Japan. There shouldn't be any unicorns in Japan. And maybe this person is saying this just to retort what someone else is saying. Or maybe they're saying it because they actually got to Japan and there's unicorns everywhere. And they're like, what? There shouldn't be unicorns in Japan. What? Get out of here, guys. You shouldn't be here. Now with this one, that one, Kumaga. Now it would, if it was correct, it would be inai hazu. We gotta keep it the short form in front of hazu. However, that's a wish, and that's referring. It's more of a wish. Like I wish there were no bears in Japan. That's not your expectation, though. Unless you truly believe that bears just don't exist in this country. But even if that's the case, change it. I would change it to inai. So if you thought, yeah, for example, if you thought that, or let me give you a more realistic, unfortunate but realistic example. It's commonly viewed that Japanese are not particularly good at English, and it's unfortunately true more than not. It has nothing to do with Japanese people. It has to do everything with the way that they're taught in Japanese schools. And so what might happen is you might come to Japan for the first time and you had this impression of Japanese people can't speak Japanese or can't speak English, and you get here and you run into a couple of people who start speaking to you in English, and you say, "Oh my goodness, wow!" And now you probably wouldn't say this to them, but you might remark to your friend, "There shouldn't be people with English this good in Japan," and you're not saying that to knock the Japanese people. You're saying that to contrast. You're saying I was led to believe that they just weren't, very good English speakers, or Japanese are typically shy. You hear that a lot. They keep to themselves. And so you don't, compared to, say, in America, you don't have people walking up and talking to you out of the blue nearly as much as you would in a Western country, relatively speaking. So you might be using this to show that contrast between what you believed, what you expected, and what is actually the case. Now, thank you everyone for putting those sentences up. And let's switch gears just a little bit. This isn't in here. In fact, it's in a separate lesson, but we're going to do a little mini lesson today because it's so important when talking about this that we'll talk about it in a much more lengthier fashion. But I'd like to introduce one more thing. And it looks very similar. It's a very short little noun kind of thing. It's called Becky. And it's not a person's name. I'm pretty sure Becky, the girl, would probably be this Becky. But so Becky is important because, and does anyone know what Becky refers to? Like, what does Becky mean? If you had to translate into one word, what does it mean? I'm not sure I can stare at that GIF for too much longer, so I'm going to delete it. Yes, Becky is should, which makes you say, wait, we were just talking about should. What's the difference here? And this is a huge difference. So I'm going to give you a quick primer on Becky, and then I'm going to show you how they contrast, how these two shoulds contrast, because we just talked about should for 40 minutes. Real fast, Becky is used, Becky. I can't think of the female name. I can't get that out of my head now. It's the only thing I hear when I say myself saying it, or when I hear myself saying it. Okay, so when you use Becky, you use it after verbs. And for example, you might be talking to someone and they say, "Oh, I love anime and I like Visual Kei and I play video games all the time, but I'm more of a shy person," and et cetera, et cetera. And someone's like, "You should go to Japan. Like, Japan would be perfect for you." And they say this: "You should go to Japan." That's how Becky is used. More specifically, you are using it. I'm going to type this out because it's not on the page in front of it. You use Becky to show what you think is the right correct thing to do. You cannot use the type form. No. Becky is used for it's used for a personal judgment. So Becky is used when you're telling someone that they should do something or not do something, and that's your opinion, that's your feeling. And so you tell someone, I think you should quit smoking. Now you may have that, and you probably do. You might have that backed up with information and whatnot, but this is not an expectation. Remember, hazu is on an expectation. When we say it should rain today, we use should because, unfortunately, should in English covers a couple of different meanings. But we don't mean should as in this is the right thing for the sky to do. Sky, are you listening to me? You need to rain today. That's not what we mean. We mean I expect it to rain. And expect to also means should in English. However, they're very clearly separated in Japanese. When we're talking about should, when we're recommending an action or not doing an action, then we use beki. So if someone, you can use it in the negative form as well. So, for example, someone says, I've heard this happen to people that love Japan, love Japanese culture, but for example, they're allergic to fish or they're vegetarian. And while I wouldn't say you shouldn't go to Japan, especially if you have an allergy, fish is everywhere in Japan. It's in mixes and whatnot. Even if you're not eating fish as a dish, you have fish in so many foods. So if someone says, I am deathly allergic to fish, then you might say, well, you shouldn't go to Japan. Nihon ni iku beki janai. Japan's got a lot of fish, especially in restaurants. It's not clear. Their allergens are not labeled as clearly as they are in a lot of countries. It's dangerous. I don't think you should go to Japan. You should not go to Japan. That's where beki comes in. It's not an expectation. You're not saying, I expect you to not go to Japan. You're saying, no, you shouldn't. Hazu is used for expectations, positive or negative. That's where the should is separate. In that, but you will hear it. You will hear it used in the translations. Just be careful. And I do like what someone just put in that kind of should. Although you could just say, yeah, today I should be free today. It doesn't, because that should is more of the contrast. Like that's going to be following up. Well, it should work, but it doesn't, kind of thing. You might say in English, yeah, today I should be free. Hima, kyou wa hima no hazu da yo. I should be free. And there's no sarcasm or there's no, but I'm not later on. It's just, I should be free. But it's what you're actually saying to draw the distinction is, I expect that I will be free. But no one says that. It's too many words. You just say, I should be free. But in Japanese, expectations go with hazu. And the should, all the other should, goes with beki. With the weather, if it's my opinion, it should be sunny today. No, you can't. You're talking about actions that people take. And yeah, it wouldn't be must either. So you wouldn't use beki to describe a state. And hareru is a state, to be clear or to be sunny. Furu is also a state in a sense. I mean, I guess it's also kind of an action. The rain is falling, there's movement going on. But beki is used for people because beki is a person. Beki is used for saying, you should do this, you should not do that, kind of thing. But you are giving your opinion. It is still an opinion, a judgment. But you are not saying you must go to Japan. There's so many different ways to say must in Japanese. It's bonkers. And we will get to it. I'm not sure how many more lessons it is ahead of here, but I'll just show you. I'm not going to explain it because I don't have time for it. But if you had to go to Japan, you'd probably say, why is it so long? Why are there so many E sounds in a row? Oh, there's too many. Let me drop one of those rays. That's must or have to. That's also not the only must or have to. Yeah, they're not fun to say. There's so much not fun to say that most Japanese don't say that. Unless you are in a more polite situation, there's a lot of ways to shorten it. And Renshu covers all those, just not yet. So you're not telling them you have to, you're giving them your belief. I think you should do this or not do that. Anyway, so again, it mentions this here very briefly. You're not talking about opinions about future actions. He should study more. She should not give up. Things like that. Those go with Becky. Becky should be the one telling you those things. Everything else, though, goes with Hazu. So I believe even with that bonus lesson, we kind of ended things as a bit shorter today. And so I think we're going to wrap things up. If there are any questions before we end, please. Becky is a person should see, but even that is not completely correct because let me show you. That's a really good question. So let me give you a couple of minimal pairs. Okay, hopefully this doesn't confuse you more. So take a look at these two sentences. Oh, and pretend I have das on the end of them. I just didn't put them on. Let's do that real fast. お父さんがすぐに帰るべきだ。お父さんがすぐに帰るはずだ。Ah, it's the same sentence, just one change. Okay, when do we use each of these? They could both be translated in English as your father or dad should return soon. They could have the exact same English meaning, but they mean very, very different things. And it's all about, we go back to context. Let's talk about the context in which each of these is used. So when would the Becky one be used? Becky would be used, for example, no, not quite. So the first one is, remember, it's an opinion. It's a personal judgment. Why would you say that dad should be home soon? Why would you say that? Like, what would make you think about that in English? Why would you say dad should be home soon? Dad needs to be home soon. Like, I believe dad should come home soon. It's my opinion he should come home soon. Why would you make that opinion? What action would necessitate that opinion? Something urgent came up. Sure. That's a perfect example. So maybe, mom is crying for some reason. Or one of the, maybe mom's also working and she can't, maybe she's out of the state for work. And, the son is having a meltdown or something and they need support. They need parental support. So in this one, something bad happened at home and the speaker thinks that Dad should come home to, you know, come to help with the situation, whatever happens to be. And to give you a more concrete example, let's say it's two kids talking, and one kid cuts themselves, and they're like, no, 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 and they call dad. Let's say they call dad, and they say, Dad, I cut myself. And dad says, you'll be fine. Don't worry. And maybe the person that said it, they're understating it. They're like, oh, it's just a small cut. I'm fine, Dad. And the father says, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I think you'll be okay. And then the older brother grabs the phone and says, Dad, listen, they're bleeding. My little brother is bleeding. You should come home. That would be the older sibling making a value judgment, an opinion, and saying, look, you should come home. I think you should come home. They're playing it down because they don't want dad to get angry, because maybe they were playing with a knife and they should have been playing with a knife. So they were like, no, it's nothing. We don't need to call dad. He doesn't need to come home. Dad, yeah, it's nothing, Dad. I'm fine. And the older son says no, or older sister says, no, Dad, you should come home. There's your Kai Rebecki. The second one is an expectation. And the expectations come from previous information, previous knowledge. So with the Hazu, you look at the clock. It's 5. That always comes back at 5. So this actually might be the same situation. So think of it this way. Two siblings. Younger child cuts themselves, not badly. It's a small cut. I want dad. I want to go to the hospital. And you're saying, no, don't worry. Look, it's 5 o'clock. Dad should be home soon. Don't worry. He'll get home. He'll help you. It's not a big cut. You're okay. I used should in both situations. Dad, you should come back. Notice Becky is used often when you're speaking directly to that person. Not necessarily. You could be referring to a third person and saying, and that's someone else should say, yeah, in that situation, Dad should come home. But the Hazu is taking previous information and saying, based on the information, this should be the case. There's no judgment. There's no opinion. It's not like I think Dad should be home because I believe he something. It's not that. It's that he comes home at 5 all the time, so he should be home at 5. Becky is personal. Becky is Becky. Becky is personal. It's opinionated. It's based on your values. It might be moral, or it might be a moral or ethical judgment. It might not. It's just what you feel to be right as an action. Hazu is expectation based on previous knowledge. I hope that helped. My English is not very good today. Anyway, we will be talking about Becky and all her fun in a later lesson. But hopefully this clears up Hazu somewhat. Again, if you need to, you can always go into Renshu's grammar library, up here, and just go into grammar and look for Hazu and get more examples as well. But otherwise, this lesson will be up inside of Discord as well as inside of Renshu. If you don't know where they are in Renshu, you can always go to resources and then Japanese lessons, and all the lessons that have videos have the little video icon next to them. So this will be added later today. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you next time we have a lesson. Thank you.